We like to bring beat reporters on this program every once in a while. The folks who are immersed in the day-to-day coverage of the Golden State Warriors. They travel with the team. They're around the team 24/7. It's a grind. It's a lot of work, but they also are insiders, meaning they're as immersed as it gets, for better or worse. And on today's show, I've got Danny Emerman of the San Francisco Standard, a relatively new news organization here in the San Francisco Bay Area. They're starting to steal a lot of prominent, steal's not the right word, I'm being facetious there, a lot of very prominent media members to spice up, to enhance their coverage. And Danny Emerman is no exception. He was a beat reporter originally with the San Jose Mercury News. Before that, he was a fellow alum of our old radio station, KNBR. And he's now with the San Francisco Standard. And he joins us next. He's going to help out he's going to help out in terms of what these two draft picks are that the Warriors picked up. The draft from the Warriors' perspective was a day ago. They traded down from the number 41 pick, and they got and they got two picks later in the draft. They actually then traded up from one of those picks, and that was a trade that involved, I believe, a 2032 second round pick. The details of that are irrelevant. What matters are the two players. Who are they? Are they going to play a role? I might ask Danny some questions about Kuminga and the offseason in general. So let's bring Danny Emerman on the program. I'm really stoked about that here on Golden Daze.
They always find something to nitpick, and that's because there's expectations for us to win. Leave me alone this summer.
Woo! Let's go. In a minute, I'ma need a sentimental man or woman to pump me up.
Oh, the hype train. Welcome to Golden Daze. That's the name of the program. My name is Cyrus Saatsaz. You can follow me on Threads and Instagram at DogWild. Over on Twitter, my handle is at SurfJournalist. I'm routinely posting different stuff on each platform, spicing things up, if you will. The program is on both platforms at Golden Daze Pod. That's the vanilla version of this program. That's your diplomatic, your far more centered social media account for this program. You can follow us there. Before we bring Danny Emerman on the program, got to give some love to the sponsors of this operation. And side note, if you're interested in sponsoring Golden Daze, we are the program to raise your IQ as a Warriors basketball fan. And we pride ourselves on that. And if you want to get the kind of love that we give our clients here, if you want to be partners with a fun operation that is providing, again, the highest level of accurate analysis pertaining to your Golden State Warriors, partner with us. We've got some deals in the works, but nothing set in stone. We have space, inventory to bring you aboard this awesome show. I hope it's awesome from your perspective. Email us at warriors24pod@gmail.com. Again, warriors24pod@gmail.com, so we can give you the kind of love that I love, sorry to be redundant there, to give to our first sponsor here, and that's Decades, a cover band that can spice up your event. We're in summer now. The weather is cooking. Outdoor activities are the thing, whether it's an anniversary, whether it's a birthday, whether it's a wedding, maybe your business needs to hold an event that needs live music, your version of the Catalina wine mixer, and you need some prestige worldwide to pump up your event. Hire Decades. They are phenomenal. They play music from the 50s to today, from Chuck Berry to Katy Perry. They were hired by Eddie DeBartolo, former San Francisco 49ers owner. The man won 5 Super Bowls. He has exceptional taste, and he hired this band, Decades. If Eddie D thinks that Decades meets the standard of live music for your event, why shouldn't you feel the same way? Reach out to Kyle at atomicmusicgroup.com. Again, Kyle at atomicmusicgroup.com, or go check out decadesofficial.com. You can also follow them on Facebook and Instagram at decadesofficial. Book them for your event and thank me later. Today's episode also brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform. And even though hoops is done, even though some other sports like hockey are done, even though the NFL is still months away, are we at weeks yet? I think it's still months. There's still plenty of other stuff you could bet on. There's golf, there's tennis, there's UFC, there's baseball. And if you want to bring a casino style ambiance to your home, you can do that with BetOnline. They've got an actual casino. You can play blackjack, you can play the slots, and of course, they've got a sports book. You can even bet on futures for the Golden State Warriors and other NBA teams for next year. I'm going to hold off on discussing that until after the first part of the offseason, so we at least know what this Warriors team looks like. Go to BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform. The game starts here. Let's bring Danny Emerman on the show. He's going to hype it up and discuss the Warriors' 2 second-round draft picks. Let me quickly introduce you to each of them, just in case you have not been following along. I've noticed a lot of members of Dub Nation are tuned out this offseason. The Warriors drafted 2 players. And again, they traded up they originally had the number 41 pick in the draft. They traded, down. And they ended up with picks 52 and 59. And then they swapped the 59th pick with the Memphis Grizzlies and moved up to 56. And again, that's where I believe they as part of that deal, they gave up a future second round pick in like 2032, and it's protected. You can't make this stuff up. It's a second round pick, I believe, in 2032 that is protected from picks 55 and up. I think it's somewhere in there, or 50 and up. So in other words, if it's a good second round pick, Memphis doesn't get a thing. But if it drops in the very bottom of the second round, then the Warriors will have to give that up again in like 2032. So who did they get? Well, they got 2 players. They got Alex Toohey, who turned 21 years old last month. He played 2 seasons with a team in Australia called the Sydney Kings, who play in Australia's National Basketball League. And I have no clue what to expect from this guy. I don't know if he's going to be a two-way guy. I don't know if he's going to be a G leaguer. Danny Emerman in just a second will hopefully provide some more information. He's 6'8", 220 pounds. He's considered to be a tweener, meaning he could play the 3, he could play the 4. He's reportedly too slow to play the small forward, however, so he's more than likely going to be a power forward, and especially in Steve Kerr's system, that's what's going to happen. Now, and here's Dunleavy. I'll just read his quote. I'm not going to play sound bites today, but Dunleavy on 2, he said, quote, "I think he's like a 4, and I think with our system and the way we play, he has the versatility to play multiple positions. It's who can you guard and where you can play offensively. And we think, especially on the defensive end, he's super versatile and creates a lot of plays." The other player that the Warriors drafted, and this is an individual I'm more excited about. This is an individual who I think we're going to see more minutes from. This is an individual who I think will take the GP2 role if Gary Payton II doesn't come back, and that's Will Richard. Will Richard finished his college career playing for Florida. They won the national title this last year. He led all players in scoring in that title game, I believe. Please don't quote me on that. I think that's accurate, though. He scored 18 points in that game on 4 of 4 shooting from deep, yet he's known more, as a defensive specialist. Mike Dunleavy said about him, quote, "We see him as a two-way player, shoot it and defend it. He's a pretty good on-ball defender, very good off-ball defender, and he's got good length. And he's coming from a really good program and system where he was well coached, well taught through many years in college. This is a guy that knows how to play. And again, something tells me Will Richard is who we're going to be seeing a lot more of in this upcoming season. The Warriors, when they started the offseason, had 9 players under contract. These 2 players will likely make it 10 and 11. So they've got 3 spots to fill. And Danny Emerman is joining me now. He's going to talk about those 2 players the Warriors just drafted. And I'm going to ask him about some other things, including Jonathan Kuminga and his future with the Warriors. Here is Danny Emerman of the San Francisco Standard, Golden State Warriors beat reporter on Golden Daze. Elated, ecstatic. I don't know how else to describe having Danny Emerman on the show. Last time he joined us, he was with a different news organization. Now he's with the San Francisco Standard, who's making a name for themselves as a news publication here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And Danny Emerman is a beat reporter covering the Warriors. Again, I cannot thank you enough, Danny, for joining the program. And you only have a few minutes, and that's fine because the focus of today's show is the draft primarily. These 2 picks of the Warriors used, they traded back from the original 41st pick. They go into the 50s to get 2 picks. I imagine at least a part of the logic here is to get to the 14 filled roster spaces in a cost-effective manner, if you will, because this guarantees 2 spots at a very cheap rate. And there's 2 players, again, if you're living under a rock, they drafted Alex Toohey, an Aussie, and Will Richard, who played for the defending national champion Florida Gators last year. Danny, great to see you, brother, and your immediate reaction to the 2 picks. Do you like them? Your thoughts on them? Take it away, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm always happy to help. Love the Golden Daze.
You're helping.
My immediate reaction is that nobody should really expect much out of second-round picks. That's kind of a standard, kind of blanket reaction. The Warriors have done well at the end of the second round with Trayce Jackson-Davis, with Quentin Post. To get guys who can contribute to the NBA roster immediately is a pretty big, boom. Most teams picking from 40 to 60 are not expecting those players to contribute right away. The Warriors are not either, but you never know with these guys. There are certain traits in both Toohey and Richard that are appealing. They could turn into good players one day. They could, have a chance to contribute this year if the Warriors are dealing with a bunch of injuries, if the roster, looks a little bit different than we might expect it to for one reason or another. I think what you said in the little intro there, I would emphasize more than anything the cost-effective way. It's not, clear that they're going to roster both of them. It's possible they roster neither of them. But the likeliest, avenue to them getting on a roster is on a 2-way or on a rookie minimum scale multi-year deal. It's really valuable for a team like the Warriors, who are really top-heavy in salary, to have these really cheap guys at the end of the bench. And that's one of the reasons why they traded down, so they could get 2 cracks at it instead of 1.
And look, you brought up that this offseason has a lot of, I don't know what you said exactly there, but I'm going to paraphrase that it's still uncertain, right? Like we still don't know what this roster is going to look like. And I think the one name that is a huge reason why we don't know yet is the future of Jonathan Kuminga. And that's likely holding up every other domino that's going to fall afterwards. Real quick, if you don't mind me asking about that, dude, this is crazy to me. I have not seen something like this in a while in terms of a player who's in this position where, you have a head coach that in hindsight has even admitted, I don't know if he's admitted himself he should have played him more, but he has said if he stays, he'll play him more. You have a coach who has ideas about fit. You have a player whose ceiling could be superstardom. What's your take? What have you seen or heard in regards to the latest with negotiations, with anything? Have you even heard anything? And if not, what's your opinion on all this? Because it's crazy, at least to me.
You really think his ceiling is superstardom?
Could be. I have no idea what his ceiling is. That's I think one of the biggest problems. What do you think?
I don't think he's shown anything close to superstardom. I think he's, a talented player for sure. He's got a high ceiling, whether or not Kuminga at his best is a player who leads to winning remains to be seen. He has had many, many, many opportunities to prove that. He has at some points for sure. He's had good stretches, and he's had stretches where he commits to defense and rebounding and also gets in his bag and scores and gets down. But he's had a lot of stretches where he hasn't put it all together too. I think it's important to not diminish that. It's been 4 years of a lot more of that than the former. In terms of negotiations, you're right. Like, this is a unique situation. I think there hasn't been a restricted free agent that, probably isn't super juiced to come back to his former team in a while. Like, maybe since DeAndre Ayton with the Suns. That situation played out where he got an offer sheet with Indiana, I believe, and then ultimately returned to the Suns and then got traded later. The last restricted free agent under the current CBA to get signed and traded, I believe, is Grant Williams 2 years ago.
Yeah, where's he these days?
Yeah. So it's pretty rare. Like, the fact that it didn't happen at all last year is a signal that it's really difficult to happen, under the current CBA and apron system. But yeah, I mean, everybody read the story in The Athletic, which was great work by Anthony Slater, with Kuminga's latest comments. And my takeaway from that is that nothing's really changed. And I've talking to some people, I think that was the, takeaway internally, is that, he's nothing if not consistent. Everybody knows this about Kuminga. He has ambition, and that can be great, but it also isn't always conducive to what the Warriors want him to do. And for that to not change at this critical juncture in his career, and for him to be so headstrong and, looking at the starry opportunities where.
Well, Danny, I want to real quick, Danny, you almost scoffed a little bit there, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of these interpretations, but it seemed like you scoffed at the idea that Kuminga could be a superstar. You mentioned a moment ago that you felt like he's had opportunities, and I'm going to push back hard on that. And the reason why I push back hard on that, and I didn't mean to make a Kuminga discussion on this with your appearance, but you did say a few things there that were a bit opinionated, and I'd love to know at least why you feel this way. Kuminga's never had a legitimate shot when it comes to minutes. His career high in minutes per game was his third year in the NBA, 26.3. You look at any other player in his position, a high lottery pick, someone who has never given an indication from the get-go that he wants or intends to be a role player. The Warriors drafted a guy who from day one never pretended that that's what he wanted to be or intended to be. And if Kerr never respected that, I almost feel like you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. When you say he hasn't had, or he's had the opportunities, why do you feel that way, given he's never come close to 30 minutes a game, which is what every one of his peers have gotten a chance to experience, so that we do know what's going to come from him? Because we have no idea what his ceiling is. Do you can you confidently say you know what his ceiling is?
I think we've seen a lot at this point, and we could probably project that, it would be my opinion or some. We've seen him play a lot of games over 4 years. And yes, you're probably right. He hasn't gotten the same amount of opportunities as a guy like Jalen Green on Houston, who got picked in the same draft and got to play with the ball in his hands a lot more. But he has had stretches like that where he gets to make decisions with the ball a lot.
1 month. He had 1 month where he averaged 30 minutes, and that was in last December, Danny. And he averaged over 21 points a game, averaged over 6 rebounds a game. He's never had another sample size spanning a month, meaning 13, 14 games, where he's played 30 or more minutes. Draymond Green even said on his own podcast that he did not agree with Steve Kerr's assessment that of having a strong opinion either direction without actually seeing him do it. I guess I'm just a little surprised here. I'm sorry. I
like the discussion. He also had 2 years ago when Wiggins was out. He was playing a ton there and played a lot more with the ball too. That was a nice little runway for him as well. To begin this season, this past season, he was in the starting lineup for a little bit. It didn't work. That's not all his fault, no doubt. But yeah, I mean, if you were asking evaluators,
he got injured, Danny. That's why it didn't work. Just to be clear, he was starting, got hurt, and then he never started again. Right? Do you remember that? I mean, Draymond Green
Not in
literally
the 12
gave
and
up.
3 start.
What's up?
Not to begin last season. He didn't get injured. He got injured when he was playing awesome, in December for sure. That was the
Oh, you're
best
talking
stretch
about
of
the
his
very
career.
beginning of the year. We started those 2
Yeah.
games, right? Yeah.
They intended to play him in the starting lineup to start last season. And yeah, that starting lineup didn't particularly work. But yeah, no, I mean, if you asked evaluators around the league about Kuminga's ceiling, you'd probably get a lot of different answers for sure. So there's not a consensus. I guess nobody can know about a hypothetical ceiling about any particular player. But yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot at this point. I think most evaluators would probably say his ceiling could be like an all-star type, But again, if he ever reaches that ceiling is to be determined.
Yeah.
What that kind of all-star player looks like in terms of a winning environment, certainly a question. I don't think people are considering him a superstar potential.
Well,
when I think of
superstars, I'm saying
superstars,
potentially. I'm very, very clear, emphatically adding the word potentially in front of the word superstar. To me, like anyone who has a strong opinion about what he could be, my response always is based on what? Like you said at the very beginning of the season, he did start. You're right, and it was a 2 full games before Kerr gave up on that idea because he's never had patience for Kuminga. Show me the evidence otherwise if I'm wrong there. But he started 2 games. Wiggins started those same 2 games at the 2, his natural position, shooting guard, and then Kerr gave up on it after game 3, I believe, because they lost to the LA Clippers in a close game after 2 blowout wins to start the season. Look, man, when it comes to Steve Kerr, I don't get any of it. 90% of what he does, I don't get. And the way he's treating Kuminga here is mind-blowing to me. Do you think I'm crazy thinking this way? What do you think from your perspective?
I certainly understand Steve Kerr's thinking a lot more than you seem to.
Can you explain it to me so that I can understand? So that can you resonate to me what you understand about Kerr that I'm missing here?
Sure, yeah. Steve Kerr wants to put the best combinations on the floor at all times. The types of combinations that lead to winning, and the types of combination that maximize Steph Curry and his gravity. The type of two-way lineups that can be tricky to get to, especially given the Warriors personnel. And yeah, like Kuminga has the potential to be that type of player, but again, he has not realized that so far in his career. He's been given a lot of chances to do that, and he has at some points, but a lot of times not. And yeah, I think there's been times where Steve is a little bit more impatient with Kuminga than some other players. But I think some of the other players that he's more patient with, play with more energy and play with more two-way intensity at times than Kuminga does. I think Steve values that. I think most coaches would value that. When you're trying to winning and you don't have necessarily the time and opportunity to let young players develop and make mistakes. And, I look at Kuminga's second year and third year when Steve would play, Anthony Lamb over Kuminga or JaMychal Green over Kuminga.
Yes.
Or even sometimes Gary Payton II. Like I look at those as opportunities where Kuminga probably should have played through mistakes more. Last year, not so much, these decisions aren't made in a vacuum. They're made, with all of this data that Kuminga is providing with his play, and they're responding to that with their decision making. And there's lots of reasons why Kuminga wasn't in the game, in the rotation, in some of the biggest moments.
I still haven't. All I've heard, Danny, is subjectivity in terms of the why of him not playing, which is that Steve Kerr has his analytics that we don't see. I haven't seen a single shred of analytics that convinces me he shouldn't play.
That Kuminga and Jimmy Butler are awesome together. You haven't seen any that Kuminga and Jimmy Butler play really well together, and that the spacing's perfect with Jimmy, Kuminga, and Draymond. And
well, again, it's pretty
clear.
Danny, the spacing thing is subjective, right? What one person says is a lack of spacing. Another person may look at it and say, I don't see a problem here. When you look at the net ratings, right, which is what you're referring to regarding Butler and Jonathan Kuminga, they're 2 out of 5 players. So if you're relying strictly on net rating for those two, and Danny, I'm sure you know this, man, that's a very subjective stat. You don't know who the other 3 people are around them. I've done a whole breakdown on this on my Substack and broke down the analytics where you're right. Draymond, Jimmy Butler, and Jonathan Kuminga, the 3 together, they played 38 minutes on the year. And I don't know if you call that giving something a chance. 38 minutes is not even a full basketball game. Their net rating, or I'm sorry, it might have even been less than 38. It might have been like 26. Or no, it was 38 minutes. I think they were minus 26 in net rating. But then when you start putting pieces together, like for example, when you look at the net rating with those 3, Steph and Podziemski, they're actually in the positive. Yet those 5 only played, I think, 5 minutes together this season. My point is, you keep bringing up like Kuminga having chances, and my pushback to that is, where do you see the chances when the numbers show he's not getting the minutes? Like, do you believe Kuminga is getting a fair shot in brief spurts?
Yeah, and a lot of other situations too. He's gotten brief spurts, he's gotten off the bench in the starting lineup, at the 4, at the 3, with the stretch 4, with Draymond, with Steph, without Steph. He's gotten a lot of chances, man. Like, we've seen it over the last 4 years. I don't have the numbers in front of me, like you might. And yeah, maybe they should have tried, all 5 of their most talented players more last season after they got Jimmy. But Kuminga was coming off the injury, and it was tough, and he had trouble reacclimating, and there were moments where it looked really clunky. And when you're trying to fight for a playoff spot and you're trying to rise up and win every game, rise up the standings, it's hard to have patience with one piece that isn't clicking. Meanwhile, you had won a bunch of games without him and it was working. So yeah, I mean, in that window of time, it was pretty tough to reintegrate Kuminga. That's the biggest reason why there's not that big of a sample size there in particular.
Have you ever seen a young player average 24, 25 minutes a game and actually make it in the NBA?
Off the top of my head, sure. Yeah.
Who?
Peyton Pritchard.
But he's not a star. I mean, he's a bench guy.
6th man of the year. He's accomplished more than Jonathan Kuminga has. Yeah.
I know, but again, you didn't draft Kuminga to be a Peyton Pritchard, did you? I mean, okay, let me ask this follow-up question then. Do you think it's fair to force Kuminga to be a role player when that's clearly not what his talent and his intentions were from the get-go?
I think it's fair to ask him to try to do what the team needs to win games. Yeah.
All right.
I think that's what every player in the NBA should be doing.
I don't know if that's realistic, but especially when your numbers indicate how much money you make, and again, the minutes. I've never seen it.
Did that? He'd get paid a ton of money. Listen, like 3-and-D players in this league make a lot of money. How much money has Aaron Gordon made?
Fair, but again, if you're Jonathan Kuminga and you're constantly getting benched after like 2-3 minutes, where subjectively your coach doesn't think it works, especially when you see how he performed in the postseason, I think you could understand why the other opinion is, what were you doing? You have Hall of Famers, NBA play. I've never seen, for example, an NBA player look at Kuminga and say, "I don't get it." Like all the people that say, give the opinions that he doesn't fit or he hasn't made it work in these limited stretches. I've never heard anyone outside of a media member or say that. I've never heard a single pro basketball player say this guy does not have incredible potential. And Steve Kerr and the media contingent are the only ones saying otherwise. And I just think it's crazy, man. Again, a lot of this is opinionated. What are you going to do? But, they're on the cusp of losing him as an asset. I think it's crazy that you're going to lose him and get back potentially nothing or assets that don't equal value. So you think this is all like Steve Kerr's been finding all this, huh?
Oh, no, there's fair criticisms of Steve Kerr for sure in his handling. And I mentioned a few of them, especially earlier in Kuminga's career. I just think it's important to look at Steve Kerr's track record and understand that this guy, he's not a bozo. He knows what he's doing. And those guys in the locker room.
I don't agree with that. We will agree to disagree there based on the last 3 years, based on really the last 6 years, where there's a lot of holes and flaws. The fact that he's never developed a single player. There is a lot of holes in that resume that when you take away an incredibly stacked roster, it leaves a lot of questions to be desired, at least from my perspective. in terms of the reverence that he gets. Going back to these two picks, we've gone way later than we should have, and I can't thank you enough for engaging in an interesting discussion here. Thank you for doing that. Real quickly, before we move on, logically speaking, how do you justify Brandon Podziemski getting the type of minutes that folks like me continually wonder why it didn't go to Jonathan Kuminga? Like, how do you justify Podziemski being younger, less years of experience, yet getting the forgiveness, getting the second chances, getting the run that Kuminga's wanted? And I think anyone who can see that he actually has talent is baffled by him not getting the same opportunities that Podziemski get. Is it because Podziemski accepts a smaller role? Is it that simple?
No, not necessarily. And I think that's another fair criticism. I think people within the organization have had similar thoughts about like the leash that Brandon gets versus the leash that Kuminga gets. I think a lot of it comes down to roster makeup with Podziemski. You know, the way the Warriors, backcourt depth is realistically is that they're going to need Podziemski to play a ton of minutes, because what are your alternatives at something like a backup point guard spot, at the 2-guard spot when you lose Melton, when you lose a couple of guys, that's one of the reasons why he was playing a ton and why they leaned on him so heavily. Meanwhile, like, they had admittedly more options in the front court, especially for Kuminga, who kind of can only play in specific lineup configurations. And when I say that, I mean having a lot of shooting around him to spread the floor, allow him to get downhill into the paint, do what he does best. Podziemski's skill set and the roster makeup are more, malleable. He can fit in more lineup configurations, and they need him to play backup point guard. I think those are the biggest factors why you see him, his minutes are pretty steady, kind of regardless of how he's playing. And he's not a perfect player either. The Warriors have had their issues with him. There's, Warrior staffers who have tried to get through to him in a bunch of different ways. And I think he's shown a lot of strides for sure. And he's a pretty coachable player. But he's a lot of ambition too, similar to Kuminga. He wants to be a star one day, and you can see it sometimes in the way he plays. And yeah, like sometimes the staff wants him to pare some of that back. Sometimes the Warriors need more of that. So it can be tricky.
Very tricky. Absolutely. We saw in the Valkyries opener, Joe Lacob and Kuminga embracing, right? Lacob clearly loves Kuminga, and there's clearly a divide there in terms of opinions on this kid. From your perspective as a beat reporter, man, how often do you think, I've never gotten a clear answer in this, probably because most people don't know, how often do you think Lacob and Kerr are communicating? Like where are they in terms of being on the same page? Because I feel like those are two people that have very different opinions about this one asset that the team has a huge decision to make on.
Yeah, I think they see the game differently, not just with Kuminga, but generally. And yeah, they're in communication fairly regularly. They talk. They're in meetings together with the front office, with coaches. Not necessarily with coaches, but yeah, in front office, especially in the off season, they'll have conversations and try to get on the same page. I think it's generally collaborative. I think Joe has opinions. I think he's an owner that makes his voice heard, for better or worse. And I think both Steve, Joe, other factors in the front office, Mike, Kirk, I think it's pretty collaborative, and everybody, Mike's leadership style as well as Steve's is pretty communicative. They want to hear everyone's opinions. They want to talk through things. I think it leads to a lot of healthy discussion. It's a good question, though.
No, and I appreciate your answer, dude. And I know you got to go, man. This was not intended. This was supposed to be a really quick hit. And Danny, this goes to show how big of a pro you are to engage with me in a discourse like this. I really do appreciate it, brother. Goes to show how great of a journalist you are. I know you got to run real quick. I brought you on because we were talking about second-round draft picks that the Warriors made. Alex Toohey, who knows what's going to happen with them? I agree with you. He could have a role. He could be a two-way guy. He could be a G leaguer. Will Richard, to me, is a pick that I think is more ready to go on day one. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but something
No, I
tells
think
me
so too.
yeah, but something tells me he might be replacing GP2 if GP2 does not come back, that he could be the person who kind of fills that role as a defensive specialist, someone who is focused on one thing, and that's perimeter defense. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Your opinion and reaction to my comments as well regarding their second-round pick, Will Richard from Florida.
Yeah, I think Richard has probably a slightly better chance to contribute right away, given he's a year older, given he was playing in the SEC last year, and that's given he was playing the type of role as a 3-and-D role player with Florida that he would probably play with the Warriors. Given that experience, I think that's important to being able to contribute right away. I think in terms of defense and replacing Gary Payton II, it's important to note that rookies generally struggle defensively to the speed and physicality of the NBA. So temper your expectations there. And also Will Richard kind of projects as a better off-ball defender than he is an on-ball stopper like GP2 is. So if the Warriors were to move on from GP2 and try to replace some of his skills internally, they'd probably have a tough time doing some of that, just given how unique of a player Gary is. But that's not to say that it's impossible or that's what they're thinking. I just think there's a lot of balls in the air right now with how they want to fill out their roster. And those second-round picks, Toohey and Richard, are kind of going to be pushed off to the side for a little bit here.
I imagine, yeah. But again, you got to fill 14 spots. They went into this offseason with 9, right? And the original expectation was the second-round pick will make 10, and then they drop back, and now you can make it 11. Kuminga would make 12 if you keep him, but who knows what's going to happen there. And, dude, you've got it covered with SF Standard, producing regular content. Again, I'm a huge fan of yours. I can't thank you enough for coming in and having a very professional discourse with me, because I'm very skeptical of Kerr. I went from someone who never criticized him once, not once, in all my years, 25 years covering the Warriors professionally, and that includes Steve Kerr from beginning to now. Never criticized me once until 2022, 2023. And when I saw the management of the young players, and then you have reporting from Ramona Shelburne, how role players, young players, do not respond well to not having a specific role, right? And that's been how every player on this team, pretty much not named Stephen Curry and Draymond Green, and until Klay Thompson was traded, that's how they all felt and still feel. They don't have their role secure. They don't feel confident in what they're going to be doing on a day-by-day basis. And as a head coach, I just don't know if that's good management. And we're seeing the result of that. I feel like the last 3 years has been a lot of underachievement, if you will. So, and a lot of that is my opinion as well, but that's me. And when I look at Steve Kerr the last 3 years, I just see mistake after mistake after mistake. And there's this perception as well, Danny, I don't know if you're aware of it, of like all the media members close to him kind of buying into his rhetoric, his friendly demeanor that lowers all your guards down. There's a very stark comparison between the media contingent close to him and how a lot of people feel when they're outside. I don't know if you're aware of that perception, but it exists. And regardless, that's my perspective on everything. You can correct me if I'm wrong on all that. I just can't thank you enough for coming on, dude, because you do a fantastic job.
It's fun to talk to a radicalized person. No, I mean...
I've never been called radicalized before, but okay.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think that characterization of the local media is fair in particular. And you mentioned something earlier about how Kerr doesn't develop young players. I would ask you, like, what young players have they had who they didn't develop and then they flourished elsewhere? I would like to see that happen before really coming to that conclusion.
Well, my pushback on that, because I've heard your colleague Tim Kawakami use that logic and rhetoric, and my pushback to that is, how can a lot of these players flourish when they've been destroyed, basically being used the way they have? Like Jordan Poole is a perfect example of this, where that Draymond Green situation, that happened under Kerr's watch. And the fact that
but you can't blame Steve Kerr for Draymond punching Jordan Poole.
Well, finger has to be, the buck has to stop somewhere, and he's in charge. I'm not blaming him for Draymond punching Poole. I am blaming him for creating a division in that locker room after the fact where Draymond Green did not face accountability for that action. Steve Kerr's never faced accountability for anything in all his years. Jordan Poole had the potential to be a lot better of a player than he is now. Kevon Looney had the potential to be a lot better player than he is now. You could argue Jacob Evans III was grossly misused. When he came back after being traded away in the Wiggins swap, the Santa Cruz team was playing him as a center. He's a 6'4" guard. Damian Jones, who knows? That's a late first-round draft pick. But more importantly, in recent years, you have Moses Moody, you have Jonathan Kuminga, and they're not going anywhere. So, I mean, in terms of development, and Kuminga could turn into something, it likely will not be with the Warriors, and that's going to be another huge stain on Kerr's resume. But so that's my reaction to the argument, to the rhetoric that, you know, who's gone on and done anything. My reaction is, how can they, when their confidence has been destroyed playing here, when there's been no development, and not to mention a lot of these draft picks were lower, so you needed some development to get the best out of them, and we never saw any of that. So that's my reaction to that.
This will be the last thing I say, then I got to go. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of development with Jordan Poole. He was a low first-round pick, spent some time in the G League with Santa Cruz.
And that's where his game changed, yeah.
He played his best ball with the Warriors. He kept getting better and better. He developed. And then he played an awesome role on the 2022 team.
Yeah.
Kevon Looney, again, you know, he was a first-round pick, late first-rounder, had injuries. They were patient with him. They developed him, and he turned out to be a great player. He's someone that, like, his jersey might be in the rafters one day. I think he's more valuable to the Warriors than any other team. I think if he was drafted to another organization, I don't think his career would have turned out the same way. I think Moody's another guy who, like, you've seen him take strides year by year. I think he's a much better player now than he was as a rookie. So when you think about drafting and developing players, you know, they're not picking high in the lottery very often because they're winning so many games. So these young prospects aren't always perfect, but I've seen a bunch of development for sure. Even Gary Payton II is a guy who they got off the scrap heap and they've put him in a role where he can thrive in. And you saw what it looked like in Portland when he was away from the Steve Kerr system.
Yeah, he was injured the whole time. But I mean, look, Jordan
when he wasn't, it wasn't pretty. And
it wasn't pretty. No, you're right. Look, Jordan Poole's career was like this with the Warriors, like this, and then the last year like this, and then he got traded. So you know, his final year, we did not see continued progression. Kevon Looney's not an all-star. He did develop nicely as a role player. Moses Moody was being benched for Lindy Waters III until that guy got traded. So explain that rationale to me. And not to mention Moses Moody on another team, who knows where he's at this point in his career, right? Again, these are my criticisms of the man, and I know he's nice, and I know he's an incredible, charming individual, a media savant, if you will. But again, dude, I look at again my Substack @DogWild. It's not hard to find. I wrote a detailed piece on this, and more specifically, in highlighting the last 6 years. The first 5 years, it was incredible. It was one of the greatest 5-year runs ever. My focus is on the last 6 years, where there's a lot of holes. There's a lot of questionable decisions that if Kerr had gone different directions, like Klay Thompson playing 32 minutes in that 0 for 10 game and the play and loss to the Kings. There's so many examples of egregious use of minutes and playing time. And again, 11 years as the head coach, not one all-star developed, not one star developed, one role player that made it, and Jordan Poole got destroyed. That's my pushback to the development thing. And again, we can agree to disagree. That's fine. And that's what makes this so much fun, right? And I stole so much of your time, dude. Where are you going after this? What are you up to?
I got to make a couple calls, do some work, yeah.
Last question, and then you can hang up on me. Is Kuminga staying or going, in your opinion? What do you think? Because I know you don't have the answer. This is strictly a subjective question and answer for you. Is he going to be a Warrior next year, do you think?
I would probably lean towards yes. Given
and the math is the biggest reason. Would you agree with that? Is that the why?
Probably, yeah. The cap machinations, the math. Bringing him back is probably still the path of least resistance cap-wise. Emotion-wise, feelings-wise, maybe not. But yeah, I think they'll probably end up protecting the asset and re-signing him, matching whatever offer sheet he gets.
What are you working on with the San Francisco Standard? In case people aren't familiar, this is a relatively new publication that is online only. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're covering everything in San Francisco and the Bay Area. They've got multiple fantastic sports media members. Tim Kawakami is a columnist there. You're a beat reporter covering the Golden State Warriors, promoted from your days with the Mercury News. What do you have working on with the San Francisco Standard and anything else you'd like to promote? And again, thank you, brother, for taking this time today, man. I know you. This was a lot for you. Thank you.
Absolutely. sfstandard.com, everything San Francisco, food and drink, politics, business, real estate, tech, sports. We're building the best sports section in San Francisco. Myself, Tim Kawakami, John Shea, David Lombardi, and more. For me, in the next couple of weeks, lots of Warriors off-season coverage. Got something in the works. Brandon Pajemski Center. That's one of the calls I'll have to make after this little podcast.
Are you traveling with him again, like you did with Draymond Green to Michigan?
No, I will not be. But maybe I'll make some trips. I'll be in Vegas in a couple weeks for Summer League.
Summer League. Beautiful. And again, people can follow your content at the SF Standard. They could follow you on Twitter at Danny Emerman. It is super easy. And again, man, the fact that you did this with me, I know I'm not easy, brother. I know that. I question bring truth to power. That's my deal. And Kerr's in power, dude. He's the guy calling the shots. So I feel like there's an impetus within me to do these kinds of things. And I know I put folks like you in a tough spot. So thank you, brother. I can't.
No, not at all. Enough. This was a good discussion. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. And that is Danny Emerman. Let me preface real quick before I say goodbye with this. Danny was supposed to be just a tiny part of the show today. He literally was. I literally called a message him and was like, "Can you just give me 10 minutes? Come on the show. Just have a brief discussion with me about these two draft picks because I don't know a damn thing about them." And I saw Danny tweeting a little bit. Oops, apologies there. I saw him tweeting a little bit about these picks. He sounded like he knew what these two would involve. But then again, like I if you're gonna sit here and just borderline blindly support Steve Kerr, you're gonna get pushback on this program. But Danny was an incredibly good sport. That was awesome. Great conversation, great discourse. And you can follow his content at the SF Standard. He was one of the only reporters this last year questioning Steve Kerr. He was one of the only reporters who would actually push back on Steve Kerr. We may or may not disagree about Kuminga. And again, I don't know what his ceiling is. I've never once pretended to know what Jonathan Kuminga's ceiling is. What I've been saying time and again is look at the average minutes he's been getting. Kuminga in year one averaged 16.9 minutes per game. That made some sense. They won a championship that year. Side note, people forget that. He was part of a championship team in year one. But then you look at year two, he averaged 20.8 minutes per game. And as Danny mentioned, he lost minutes to, Anthony Lamb, JaMychal Green, egregious. That was criminal. Year three, Kuminga averaged 26.3 minutes per game. And he saw his role diminish as the year concluded, where in the playing game against the Kings, for example, as I mentioned with Danny, Klay Thompson getting 4 more minutes than him. And then this last year, he averaged his minutes went down. True story. 24.3 minutes per game. And I've exhausted on this show the data pertaining to the lineups as Danny brought up. And again, I'm really glad that he actually said all these things because these media types, and I know you didn't like hearing this part of it, but they're so insulated in terms of their coverage with the Warriors. Like they are this small group that travels together, that are they're basically in a business together. Not basically, they literally are. Excuse me there. And and again, Steve Kerr, I've interviewed him myself multiple times. I sat down with him for one-on-one for 10, 15 minutes, not to talk basketball, but to talk surfing. He went out of his way. And if you Google Steve Kerr surfing, that's the first story that'll pop up. And he's a very affable individual. He's very charming. He knows how to, I don't know if manipulate's the right word, but he certainly knows how to charm and get the best out of media coverage in terms of getting a positive spin applied to him. But when you look at this stuff objectively, it doesn't make sense. It just, and again, I was a little prepared for the rhetoric of who's gone on and developed, because I heard Tim Kawakami use that exact BS with I think Tom Tolbert, side note, one of Steve Kerr's buddies. So you're not going to get objective coverage from that guy. Him and Steve were Arizona pals and are in the same circles. Side note, Tom Tolbert, I was his former producer, in case you're not aware of that. And my criticism of Tommy's always been, stop acting like you're hot shit. You look at Larry Krueger. He's friends with all his former producers. He socialized and actually did not pretend he was better than all of his colleagues. Tom Tolbert would come in the building at 2:59 p.m., do his show, and bounce at 7:01 p.m., and no one ever socialized with him. He thought he was too cool for everyone. And that rubs me the wrong way, okay? I don't think I'm special. I don't think anyone in this world is special enough to insulate themselves from others because they think they're hot shit. That doesn't fly with me. And that's how that circle rolls. They've got massive egos, man. I don't know if that was a Lute Olson influence. I don't know what the hell, where that came from. I don't know if it was just growing up in that period and where back then a college basketball player, and it's, look, I mean, he, at least for Kerr's sake, he played for the Bulls and the Spurs, so he was just surrounded by stardom, and maybe the ego just exploded from there. But Tolbert didn't experience stardom in the NBA. He played for the Warriors and some other teams as a role player. But at Arizona, they were stars. And so I don't know if the ego thing started then. I don't know if it started in high school. Who knows? Just don't act like you're too cool for other people, man. That is just, in this day and age, especially where authenticity is a trait that's valued, where transparency is something that if you don't embrace, you're going to look like you're hiding something. This is the world we're in now. And I'm grateful for that. And unfortunately, though, Kerr is not living in this world today because he has a hard time connecting with his young players. He thinks nepotism is cool. I mean, I know a lot of people in the NBA do that. Doesn't make it right. And he has done a phenomenal job convincing these media members around him that he's a hell of a lot more special than he is. And I get it, but you got as a journalist, I guess that's my mentality here. As a journalist, you have to put a wall, metaphorically speaking, between yourself and the subject. If you don't, you're going to have a bias one way or the other. That was a damn good discussion, though. I can't thank Danny Emerman enough for coming on. That was good stuff. That really was. I never really had a chance to hear how he felt about things. And look, that's the beauty of sports, right? Or debates like these. That's what makes these so awesome. All right, we're done. Hope you have a nice weekend. I know you expected, or at least I hyped up before this show started, this is going to be a show dedicated to the 2 draft picks, but then it turned into an awesome conversation about Steve Kerr and his handling of the young players, and that includes Jonathan Kuminga. Hope you have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you. And we'll be back at this soon. If there's any news that breaks, we'll go live immediately. Until then, thank you as always, and bye-bye.